So the hardware inventory of the IP devices is defined in this RFC. With this RFC, we define the junk model with all the information that we want to store about the hardware inventory of the devices. In this way, it gives the information for physical and also for virtual routers. It's more or less the same, but in the virtuals we have different components. So we need to define a general architecture to define each component instead of only for physical devices. It can be used to study all the technologies, as I explained, because you can upload physical devices, virtual, and have the inventory of all the devices. In Telefonica, we are combining this hardware inventory with the topology, and we can have two different use cases. The topology with the reference of the hardware inventory, or only the hardware inventory with the reference of the router. So you can extend the topology with this information to know more about each device in the network. So also, we have a top-down reference pointing to the peer subject. So it's also for the topology. We want to implement an agnostic and multi-vendor way to do this, and we are doing it in TerraFlow. By the moment, we can upload the hardware inventory of Aptran devices, Cisco, Huawei, and Juniper. So we are working in progress to do it for more vendors. And we are doing it via OpenConfig with NetConf. And we are using the platform model from OpenConfig. That it retrieves you all the information of the hardware of the device with the configuration and the status of the components. So in TerraFlow, we are combining the configuration and the status to know, for example, if an interface is up, if the interface has a transceiver plug in it, the type of the transceiver, if the transceiver is working or it's down. So with this model, you can retrieve all the information of the topology and the devices. Here we have an overview of the inventory with a schematical view, where for each network element, we start with the chassis as the root element. So all that we detect depends from the chassis or from the rack. Depends if it's virtual or physical. And for each chassis, we can have this sub-slot for each component, for example, the slot of the ports, the fans, the power supplies, or the board that it's different in physical and virtual devices. For example, in virtual devices, we have the board that have all the ports, but in physical we have a type of component that is port specifically, instead of depending on board. So it's more or less the same, but have some difference with the virtual devices. And this is more or less the most important component that we identify mixing the physical and virtual devices. So from the chassis, we have, depends the power supply, the fans, the line cards, the fabric, and the CPU. The fabric, I think that it's only for the virtual devices. The physical devices doesn't retrieve this parameter. And later we have the ports with their own transceiver. I explained, more or less these are the most important components that we identify and that we implement in TerraFlow with the hardware inventory. That are the same, but with the FRU also. These are all the parameters that the RFC implements, and I highlight only the parameters that we think are more important that we implement. We have the name, the class, that is the type of the component. It can be the class fan, class power supply, class transceiver, class port. It's the type of the component. The description, that it's an optional parameter in the model, and the parent, that it's a reference of the previous component. For example, the transceiver, the parent is the port. So we say for transceiver 1, the parent is port 1. And for the fan power supply, the parent is the chassis. So this information is in the netconf model, and we process this and create a diagram in a tree to represent this inventory. And later, some information about the device, as the hardware revision number, the firmware revision number, the model name, and this depends on the type of the device, if it's physical or virtual. So the implementation in TerraFlow, in the web UI, we have the tab of device. So we implement this icon with the link to the hardware inventory. So if you click in this icon, you will go to the tab of the inventory, which we have the root component with all the parents that we identify in the device. So I open a little the tree, and we can see that the chassis have the ID, all the attributes that we identify as the most important, and also, for example, the fan 1, the fan 2, with also the ID and the attributes, the power supplies, and also for an interface, we have this, that it's type port with a transceiver. So in this case, the transceiver isn't connected. We have removable true, so the transceiver isn't present in the device, but if the transceiver is present, we will have more information about this.